Greetings, everyone. As leaders faced calls to resign, the military rebelled against the surrender order. Ladies and gentlemen, a political earthquake is shaking Tehran, but this time, the enemy does not come from outside. The crowds protesting aren't the opposition. They're the regime's most loyal supporters, outraged by a humiliating surrender order. What is really happening behind the tightly closed walls of the Islamic Republic? Huge crowds are pouring into the streets of Tehran, but these are not protesters against the regime. They are actually the most loyal supporters of this system. Right now, they are in a state of extreme anger and suffocating confusion because they can't believe that Iran has just made a humiliating surrender. That's why they are standing up to oppose those in power, the ones who are directly negotiating with the United States. Shouts are echoing. They are desperately calling on the supreme leader to break the silence and make a final statement. It's been more than a month since the supreme leader was elected, but the Iranian public still hasn't heard his voice or seen any sign of him anywhere. Now, it seems the entire regime is falling into a full-scale civil war from within. Politicians are turning against each other. The military is fiercely confronting those who compromise with the United States. And the people's trust in all levels of government is gradually shattering into pieces. Yesterday, the Iranian foreign minister issued a statement affirming support for the ceasefire agreement in Lebanon. The route through the Strait of Hormuz for all commercial ships will be declared completely open for the remainder of the ceasefire. This statement was like a powerful shockwave spreading across the world, and it caused a stir even among those within the Iranian government. We are witnessing parliamentary leaders and IRT commanders publicly speaking out, strongly opposing what the foreign minister has said. They declared that they couldn't believe this was true. They called for his impeachment, and some even demanded harsher punishments for what they considered this act of betrayal. This is a detailed report on what is happening inside Iran right now. The Islamic Republic is showing serious cracks at the highest levels. A tragedy is unfolding in real time. After Erdogan and Trump both asserted that the Strait of Hormuz was open, media outlets affiliated with the IRGC are now openly questioning the responsibility of officials. They warn of widespread chaos in the country and strongly demand a clear explanation for the long, puzzling silence. At the same time, IRGC messages through state television have made it clear that this strategic waterway is still under control, restricted, and completely under the close supervision of the military. Across pro-regime communities, channels linked to the pro-Bizas and PRA forces are boiling with anger over the so-called agreement to open the Strait of Hormuz. This has exposed a direct and tragic contradiction between the diplomatic scenario on paper and the harsh military reality. Even media outlets close to the regime are signaling that something is not matching up within the power apparatus. And this is exactly what we discussed just a few weeks before the negotiations began. Iran currently does not have a unified government. There are different power factions existing, and the United States seems to be choosing to negotiate with the faction they consider the strongest. However, that does not negate the fact that there are still powerful individuals in Iran with motives and goals different from the negotiating faction. All factions are desperately trying to ensure that they will be the ones at the top of power when this conflict ends. And in that brutal race, they want to make sure their rivals don't gain any benefit or recognition from a successful ceasefire agreement. The opposing factions don't want the other side to gain any advantage from ending the war. Whoever negotiates successfully with the United States will have the upper hand in ruling the country once peace returns. It was exactly that pressure to seize power over life and death that made the factions do everything they could to bring each other down. This pushed the country to the brink of a literally devastating civil war. And as I have emphasized, while all these terrifying upheavals were happening, Iran's new supreme leader still had not made a single statement, either in audio or visual form. We have never heard his voice, nor have we seen him appear since this war began. He could be in a deep coma or may have even passed away a long time ago. We can't be certain about the truth behind that veil of mystery. Although there have been some written statements issued, they were read by someone else. How can we believe that those words truly came from the supreme leader? If I've learned anything about how Iran operates, then I believe those statements definitely did not come from this leader. And the Iranian state media is just lying to reassure the public. In fact, I could even be the one who wrote those lines without you knowing. We are completely in the dark about who the real supreme leader is and where he is. Now, for the Iranian foreign minister, the situation is becoming extremely dire. Things are getting even worse because of the tough statements being made from President Trump and U.S. Central Command. Take a look. Right after the foreign minister announced to the world that the Strait of Hormuz was open, the Central Command immediately responded. The U.S. naval blockade will continue without interruption. It won't matter what Iran is trying to do. Iranian ports will not be allowed to receive any ships. After that, President Trump himself reiterated this exact strong message. Now, I'm sure you can understand why in the eyes of the Iranian people. This is nothing short of a humiliating and unconditional surrender. Iran only has one strategic leverage, which is the Strait of Hormuz, yet the foreign minister publicly offered it up without getting anything in return of value. No long-term peace agreement has been signed, and the American blockade is still tightening its grip on the nation's throat. So Iran's economy is still plummeting out of control. This is why even his associates, the foreign minister's own political allies, are now openly turning their backs on him and speaking out against him. Take the case of this lawmaker who is fiercely calling for impeachment. An Iranian lawmaker named Mustafa Mahmoudi has declared that Foreign Minister Abbas Araghi will face impeachment for his statements on social media. He is accused of making mistaken statements at a very sensitive time during a period of war. In a post on Twitter, Mahmoudi asserted that if it weren't for the country being at war, Abbas Araghi would have been dismissed immediately because of that message. He emphasized that this is not the first time the foreign minister has made strange and irresponsible statements at critical moments. At the same time, he added that those words have caused terrible negative impacts on the oil and global energy markets. Although we do not delve into the intricacies of Iran's internal politics, it is clear that this man has significant influence, and his accusations are completely justified. Here's the oil price chart from yesterday, right after Araghi's statement. The oil price plummeted disastrously below $90 for the first time in a very long while. That morning, the oil price was still holding above $100 per barrel, but it dropped straight down to $83 just because of the news that the Strait of Hormuz was open. From an objective perspective, this is Iran's ultimate weapon, its final leverage. If Iran can close this strait, oil prices will skyrocket, creating enormous pressure both within the United States and on the international community, forcing them to back down or make major concessions to Iran. But now, as oil prices are cooling down, the pressure on the United States is also gradually disappearing like soap bubbles. And let's be honest with each other, militarily, Iran is no longer a formidable force. They barely have any real military power left. The only remaining weapon is the drones that can be used to paralyze the Strait of Hormuz. But because of the foreign minister's reckless statement, that vital leverage has been severely weakened. This is why Iranian society is boiling with anger and turning its back on those conducting the negotiations. And I sincerely emphasize that the voice of the politician we just mentioned is not the only one. Out there, many other powerful figures are also standing up and taking similar actions to oppose this compromise. This time we mention Ayatollah Musani, a former very powerful minister of culture. He issued a strong warning on Friday that Iran is at risk of completely losing its strategic advantage and suffering a disastrous defeat in the information war if timely action is not taken during these sensitive times. According to him, if the Supreme National Security Council, Iran's highest authority, cannot appoint a competent spokesperson who does not know how to speak up at the right time and cannot take the initiative in guiding public opinion, the country will suffer terrible damage in the fierce psychological and media wars. Simply put, this man is bitterly admitting that Iran is losing completely in the propaganda war, which was one of the few fronts where Tehran once placed a lot of hope, and that is exactly why he is so furious. But to be fair, even though Iran may be at a disadvantage on the propaganda front, they are still doing their best, fighting to their last breath in an uncompromising stance. If you still have doubts, just look at the piece of propaganda they put out as soon as the war began. It may not be the most outstanding work, but clearly the creator put all their heart into it. You could even say they poured their soul into it, like a modern-day Mona Lisa masterpiece. Let's take a look. Once again, Iranian accounts are loudly claiming that they shot down a B-2 Spirit bomber right over the skies of Tehran. In the video, you can see a bomber worth at least $2 billion leisurely being carried around the city on a flatbed truck. The harsh reality is that Iran doesn't have the technology to take down a B-2. But even if we assume they did, a bomber shot down at an altitude of over 15,000 meters would usually be blown to pieces, not land intact like that. You would think that everyone would realize this was a clumsy act. But in reality, the United States Central Command had to personally confirm that all 4 B-2 bombers involved in the strike on Iran were safely on their way back to Wayman Air Force Base. This is a statement from Iran's national news agency, Tasnim News Agency. Using blunt language, they directly criticized the statement made by the Iranian foreign minister as terrible and seriously lacking. These contradictory statements are creating an atmosphere of vague confusion across the country and making the public extremely angry. This is exactly why the foreign minister is facing intense criticism. They also emphasize that movement through the Strait of Hormuz will be completely under the control of the Iraqi Islamic Revolutionary Guard forces. Any ship wishing to pass through must closely coordinate with the Iraqi naval forces. The situation got so bad that the Iranian parliament chairman, who once led the delegation in negotiations with the United States, quickly made a statement for damage control. He affirmed that regardless of what the Iranian foreign minister or President Trump said, none of it has any value. Let's take a closer look at his statement. First, he said that the President of the United States made 7 statements within 1 hour, and all of them were lies. They cannot win the war with lies and will certainly not achieve any results in negotiations. With the United States continuing the blockade, the Strait of Hormuz will never be open. Traffic through this strait will have to follow the designated route and must have Iran's permission. Whether the strait is open or closed and its regulations will be decided by the situation on the battlefield, not by social media. It's ironic he criticizes social media, since the previous statement wasn't even from his ally. Iraqi declared the Strait of Hormuz open even before President Trump spoke up. This is exactly the tragicomic reality of Iran's current politics, where no one really knows who is actually in charge. Nevertheless, I want to provide you with some important context. First, some ships have actually passed through the Strait of Hormuz using the usual route, meaning they went right through the middle of the strait instead of following the route Iran is forcing ships to use. This reveals a lot to us. I know that a few ships are nothing compared to the hundreds of ships passing through every day, and it can't immediately solve the global oil crisis. But it confirms an important truth. These ships have passed through the very waters that Iran claims to have filled with mines. Yesterday, just a few minutes after the foreign minister made a statement, a cruise ship that had been stuck in Dubai for 47 years decided to take an all-or-nothing gamble. It went straight through the middle of the Strait of Hormuz and is now safe in international waters. This shows that either there are no mines underwater at all, or there is a safe path right through the strait that you can pass through without any trouble. I have a feeling that this detail will become extremely important later on. And this is the second noteworthy point. Remember this man, his name is Ghalibab, the chairman of the Iranian parliament? He declared last week that he would not go to Pakistan to negotiate with the United States unless there was a ceasefire in Lebanon. And guess what? There was no ceasefire in Lebanon last week at all, but he still quietly went to Pakistan to negotiate. The ceasefire in Lebanon only actually happened yesterday or 2 days ago. So, this man who already has a habit of lying, and maybe that's exactly what he's doing now to cover up the chaos happening inside Iran. They negotiated with the United States. They said the Strait of Hormuz was open. Then, when faced with strong opposition from public opinion, from the Iraqi military, and from other politicians, they tried to walk back what they said to maintain their grip on power. Now, I want to share with you a very interesting piece of information related to the Twitter account of this Speaker of the Parliament. Because it seems that someone right here in the United States is actually the one behind the posts he is uploading. Some of Ghalibab's posts during the war reveal an unusually deep understanding of American culture. It appears written by someone who deeply understands the American mindset and expertly runs a Twitter account. And surprisingly, Iranian Wire has just conducted an investigation and confirmed that those suspicions are completely valid. They even found out who that person is and where they are living. Let's take a look at this investigative report to meet the man behind the Ghalibab Twitter account. Since the war began, this account has posted almost every day, sometimes in English, sometimes mixed with emojis or Gen Z jokes, directly targeting the American public. Observers have noticed the sophisticated English skills, the understanding of American psychology, and the proficient use of internet culture. They believe this is an English-fluent advisor who belongs to Iran's third generation. This is the generation that belongs to Iran's elite families, those who are part of the Islamic regime. But this third generation actually does not live in Iran. These generations, they have a more open-minded outlook and a more international lifestyle. They live all over the world. Thanks to that, they have a deep understanding of international culture and especially the sophistication of Western culture. According to the results of this investigation, the man is actually the one running the Twitter account, is Maysam Zamanabadi. Currently, he is residing in the city of Glendale, California, USA. He comes from a family with close ties to the Tehran regime. He also has a long history of running pro-government media networks in the past. In fact, he was a personal advisor to Galabab in 2003 and likely maintained that position for a long time afterward. We don't know exactly when he left this position, but it seems that now he has returned to devote all his efforts to assisting the country to which he has pledged his loyalty, right in the midst of the chaos and turmoil of war. It's truly an absurd and ironic contradiction when someone has a burning love for the Islamic regime but chooses California as his place of refuge. He is doing his best to defend a regime that is destroying the lives of 92 million Iranian people every day. Meanwhile, he himself longs to enjoy a free life right here. In the United States, a country that the Islamic regime always denounces and curses as the great Satan full of sin, this is yet another typical example of the blatant hypocrisy that we have witnessed all over the world. China's elites and powerful politicians also send their families to the West, even to the United States. This situation is similar among the elite in Russia. Russian oligarchs have even begged the U.S. government not to sanction them so they can maintain their luxurious lives abroad. And now a similar scenario is repeating itself with Iran. They want to protect the regime from afar to maintain their privileges, but they refuse to live directly under its harsh rule. I truly hope that anyone supporting this Islamic regime can be clear-headed enough to see the profound hypocrisy in all of this. However, behind the velvet curtains and the polished propaganda, an atmosphere of utter chaos is engulfing Iran from within, especially at the highest levels of leadership, where cracks are becoming irreparable. In your opinion, is the strange silence of Iran's supreme leader for more than 30 days a psychological tactic, or is it a sign that a real power shift has already taken place?